Picture this for a moment. A massive aircraft, bigger than most airliners, designed to fly for days without landing, carrying enough sensors and weapons to hunt an enemy that never actually showed up. Billions spent, decades of engineering, and when it finally rolled out, the war it was built for was already over. Not lost, not won, just gone. This is the story of an aircraft Russia built for a war that never came, and how one of the most ambitious military projects in modern history quietly became irrelevant. In the late Cold War, Soviet planners were obsessed with one nightmare scenario. Not tanks rolling across Europe, not nuclear missiles flying overhead, but something much quieter and far more dangerous. American ballistic missile submarines slipping through the oceans, invisible, unstoppable, waiting for the order that would end everything. These submarines were the backbone of U.S. nuclear strategy, and the Soviets knew that if they couldn't find them, nothing else really mattered. So they went looking for a solution in the sky. The idea was simple, at least on paper. Build a long-range maritime patrol aircraft that could stay airborne for extreme lengths of time, scan huge areas of ocean, detect submarines using every sensor imaginable, and coordinate an entire anti-submarine war from above. It would be part aircraft, part flying command center, something that could dominate the seas without ever touching them. The result was an enormous, complex machine that pushed Soviet engineering to its limits. It had to fly low and slow to deploy sensors, then climb high to relay data. It needed powerful radar, magnetic anomaly detectors, acoustic processing systems, and space for operators to manage all of it in real time. And it had to do this while flying thousands of kilometers from base, often in brutal weather, for missions that could last more than half a day. On the drawing board, it was terrifying. To NATO planners, this aircraft represented a serious threat. If it worked as intended, it could have turned the oceans into hostile territory for submarines that were supposed to be untouchable. For years, Western analysts tracked its development closely, wondering if this would finally close the gap in undersea warfare. But here's the problem. The world was changing faster than the aircraft could be built. As engineers were refining radar systems and acoustic processors, submarines were getting quieter, much quieter. New propulsion designs, improved hull coatings, and better tactics meant that by the time the aircraft was nearing operational readiness, the targets it was meant to find were already slipping beyond its reach. Detecting a nuclear submarine from the air was becoming less about raw sensor power and more about networked intelligence, satellites, and long-term tracking. Things the aircraft was never designed to rely on. Then came the collapse. The Soviet Union didn't slowly wind down. It imploded. Budgets vanished overnight. Supply chains broke. Entire military doctrines were thrown into question. The massive ocean-spanning conflict this aircraft was built to fight simply stopped being relevant. Russia inherited the program, but not the strategic environment that justified it. When the aircraft finally entered service, it did so in a completely different world. Instead of hunting American submarines in a global naval standoff, it was now tasked with regional patrols, intelligence gathering, and showing the flag. Missions it could technically perform, but not ones that required such an expensive and specialized platform. And this is where the real tragedy of the design becomes clear. The aircraft wasn't bad. In fact, from a purely engineering standpoint, it was impressive. It could stay airborne for absurd lengths of time. Its sensor suite was advanced for its era. It gave Russia a unique capability that very few countries could even attempt to match. But it was overbuilt for the reality it faced. It was a Cold War giant wandering into a post-Cold War world. Maintenance was another nightmare. Complex systems require constant care, and this aircraft had a lot of them. Keeping even a small fleet operational demanded trained crews, spare parts, and funding that Russia increasingly struggled to provide. As years passed, fewer airframes were fully mission-capable at any given time. The aircraft existed, but it rarely operated at anything close to its intended potential.
What makes this aircraft so fascinating is that it represents a very specific type of military mistake. It wasn't a failure of technology, but a failure of timing. The engineers perfectly solved the problem they were given. The strategists just kept changing the question. If you're enjoying this kind of deep dive storytelling into forgotten machines and ambitious designs, this is a good moment to hit like and subscribe. Channels like Forbidden Engineering exist because people want to understand not just what was built, but why it mattered and why it sometimes failed. Subscribing really helps keep these stories coming. By the 2000s, naval warfare had shifted again. Drones, satellites, and distributed sensor networks were becoming the future. Instead of one massive aircraft trying to do everything, modern militaries started relying on many smaller systems. Working together, this aircraft, once envisioned as the centerpiece of anti-submarine warfare, became just another node in the network, and an incredibly expensive one at that. Russia attempted upgrades, of course. They installed new electronics, better data processing, and improved sensors. But upgrades can only take you so far when the original concept no longer fits the modern battlefield. Each modernization extended its relevance a little, but it was never enough to make it truly central to naval strategy again. Meanwhile, its original enemy had moved on completely. US submarines were now operating in ways the aircraft could never reliably counter. The war it was built for wasn't just delayed, it had been replaced by something else entirely. There's also a psychological side to this story that we can't ignore. Military projects often take on a life of their own. Once enough money, prestige, and national effort are invested, cancelling them becomes almost politically impossible. This aircraft survived not because it was perfectly suited for the future, but because it symbolized capability, continuity, and national pride. Letting it go would have meant admitting that an entire strategic vision had expired. So it stayed flying, patrolling, gathering data, always useful, but never decisive. Today, when military analysts talk about this aircraft, they often struggle to categorize it. It's too specialized to be a general-purpose platform, but it's too outdated to dominate its original intended role. It exists in a strange middle ground, a powerful reminder of how quickly warfare evolves and how slowly large, complex systems can adapt. And that's the real lesson here. Wars aren't just fought with weapons, they're fought with assumptions. This aircraft was built on the assumption that the next great conflict would look a lot like the last one, just bigger, more intense, and with better technology instead. The world pivoted, technology shifted, politics changed, and the aircraft was left chasing ghosts. Near the end of its operational life, the irony becomes almost poetic. Here you have a machine designed to hunt the most advanced submarines on Earth, and it spends most of its time doing routine coastal patrols. Its most powerful systems rarely used to their full extent, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too late. This was the aircraft Russia built for a war that never came, and in that silence between expectation and reality, it tells us more about military history than any single battle ever could. If this story surprised you, or if you see parallels to modern weapons being built today, drop a comment. I read them all, and they often shape the topics of future videos. Before we wrap up, I'm genuinely curious what you think about this. Was this aircraft a tragic waste of engineering talent, or was it just an unavoidable product of the time it was built in? Let me know, because debates like this usually turn into the most interesting conversations on the channel. And if you've spotted any modern weapon systems that feel like they're heading down the same path, I definitely want to hear about those too. If this story made you see military technology a little differently, consider sharing it with someone who loves aviation, engineering, or Cold War history. These kinds of projects are best understood when you can talk them through with someone else. Sharing the video really helps this channel reach people who enjoy this deeper systems level look at how things are built and why they sometimes miss the very moment they were meant for. These projects are more than just machines. They're time capsules of the fears and expectations of the era that created them. Thanks for watching.